Hi everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm making a European walnut cake, very soft, delicate and not overly sweet. This is one of those cakes that feels simple but tastes rich and comforting at the same time. It's perfect for family gathering, holidays or just when you want something homemade and cozy. This cake has a light walnut sponge and smooth caramel style cream that pairs beautifully with the nuts. The recipe is simple, doesn't take much time, and the result is tender, full of flavor and satisfying. First, we will make the sponge cake, starting with the walnuts. Take 70 grams of walnuts and lightly toast them in a dry cast iron pan over medium heat. This step doesn't take long, but it really brings out the flavor and aroma of the nuts. Keep stirring so they toast evenly and don't burn. Once they are fragrant and lightly browned, take them off the heat and let them cool slightly. Then chop the walnuts and set them aside for later. Now let's move on to the sponge cake batter. Take 4 eggs and separate them into whites and yolks. Make sure the bowl for the egg whites is completely clean and dry, and that no yolk gets into it. Add a small pinch of salt to the egg whites and start whipping them. Once they become foamy, add 120 grams of sugar in 3 additions. After each addition, beat until the sugar is fully dissolved. Then add the vanilla extract and continue whipping until stiff peaks form. To check if it's ready, carefully flip the bowl. The meringue should not move at all. Add the egg yolks one at a time, mixing gently on low speed after each addition. The batter should stay light and airy. Next, sift in 5 grams of baking powder and 115 grams of all-purpose flour. Now, this is an important step. Fold everything in carefully with a spatula, using slow movements so the batter doesn't lose its volume. Use gentle circular motion toward the center, and don't rush this process. When everything is fully mixed, add the chopped walnuts and gently fold them in until evenly distributed. Take a 7-inch 18 centimeters cake pan or cake ring. I'm using a cake ring, so I just line the bottom with foil. Then pour the batter into the prepared pan and gently level the surface. Next, place it on the baking sheet and lightly tap the pan on the counter to release any large air bubbles. After that, bake the sponge cake in a preheated oven at 320 degrees Fahrenheit or 160 degrees Celsius for about 20 to 25 minutes. I checked my sponge cake after 20 minutes and it was still slightly jiggly in the center, so I bake it for another 10 more minutes. Once the sponge was fully set, the internal temperature reaches about 194 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 degrees Celsius. Then remove the cake from the oven and immediately flip it upside down to cool on a wire rack. Meanwhile, let's make the frosting. First, add 340 grams of room temperature cream cheese to a mixing bowl. Then add 380 grams of caramel. I'm using dulce de leche, which is simply boiled sweetened condensed milk. Mix everything together until smooth. Next, pour in 50 grams of heavy cream, just enough to help everything blend smoothly. Continue mixing until the frosting is completely smooth and creamy. The texture should be thick but easy to spread. If needed, you can add a little more cream to adjust the consistency. Once the frosting is ready, set it aside while we prepare the cake for assembly. Once the sponge cake has completely cooled, carefully remove it from the pan. You will see that the sponge is very airy and light. Now we need to divide it into 3 layers. I don't have a special cake cutting tool, so I use a simple method. First, I insert toothpick around the cake from 3 sides to mark the layers. Then I carefully cut the cake with a bread knife, following the toothpicks. Now we can start assembling the cake. First, place the first sponge layer on a serving plate or a cake board. I'm using the top part of the cake so the firmer brown side is facing down. Then gently soak the sponge with milk, just enough to make it moist but not wet. Next, divide the frosting into 3 parts and spread one even layer on top. After that, place the second sponge layer on top, lightly soak it with milk and spread another layer of frosting. Then add the final sponge layer, soak it lightly with milk and cover the top with the remaining frosting. Finally, smooth the top and sides of the cake until it looks clean and even. Once the cake is fully assembled, you can leave it as it is or decorate it simply. I like to keep this cake minimal and classic, letting the walnuts be the main focus. So I just chop a little more walnuts and cover the sides of the cake. Then I add a few more walnuts on top and that's it. Here you can really let your imagination play. At this point, it's best to let the cake rest in the refrigerator for a few hours, or ideally overnight. This allows the layer to set, the sponge to absorb the cream, and the flavors to fully develop. When you are ready to serve, slice the cake with a sharp knife and enjoy. You will see how soft and tender it is inside, with delicate layers and a creamy filling in between. And that's it. Thank you so much for baking with me today. If you enjoyed this recipe, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.